like, comment, share, subscribe. Thanks for watching.
Filed February 8, 2024, 11:31. AM Clerk of SUPER IORCOURT DeKalb County, Georgia. In the Superior Court of DeKalb County, State of Georgia, Eligio Bishop. Defendant's brief in response to the state's notice of intent to introduce other acts. Evidence pursuant on or about January 25, 2024. This honorable court held an evidentiary hearing to consider the state's proposed evidence under OCGA 24-4-413 and OCGA 24-4-404B. In the instant case, the defendant is charged with rape, false imprisonment, and electronic transmission of nude or sexually explicit material. For total of counts, the alleged victim in each of the counts is the same. The state seeks to introduce evidence of what they would describe as other sexual assaults. Off the testimony of the three evidentiary witnesses presented on January 25, 2024. Only one of the three even remotely alleged sexual assault. The other two witnesses did not describe sexual assault, and when asked directly on cross-examination, two of the evidentiary witnesses denied being raped by the defendant.
Now, I must interject because that is incorrect. I believe that all three witnesses did describe events in which they were not interested in sexual intercourse with the defendant, but it happened anyway.
It is undoubted that the defendant lived polygamous lifestyle in the United States and various other countries prior to his arrest. The state's intent is to introduce this lifestyle to the jury by any means necessary. The state argues that the evidence is probative. There is no probative value in at least two of the three witnesses, which failed to assert sexual assault while under oath before this honorable court. The state further seeks to admit what it describes as evidence of the defendant's physical violence. In the instant matter, the defendant is not charged with an act of physical violence. The evidence at trial is expected to be that the defendant had sexual intercourse with the purported victim in room of house where the defendant lived with the accuser and others. The state has not provided any evidence of any physical restraint or violence against the alleged victim in order to have sex on the date at issue.
Now that part, he is absolutely correct. None of the witnesses were there on the date of the incident being charged here. So
the defendant is not charged with any counts of battery, assault, or the like against the accuser. The defendant is instead charged with false imprisonment by allegedly confining the accuser against her will. There is no allegation within the indictment that the defendant behaved in violent manner or that the accused was injured or harmed in any way as a result of the alleged false imprisonment. The defendant is not alleged to use physical violence in order to effectuate the alleged false imprisonment.
This is where Booker starts to grow his teeth because he is absolutely correct. The defendant is not charged with an act of physical violence in order to keep the accused falsely imprisoned. He's not charged with that here. So all of the witnesses' accounts of physical violence, particularly witness number 3, is irrelevant to this case. So Booker, I'm telling y'all, Booker got some rabbits he about to pull out his hat.
The three evidentiary witnesses did in fact describe alleged acts of physical violence, but there has been no allegation of physical violence in the instant case. There would be no probative value in permitting the three evidentiary witnesses to testify to acts of physical violence. The state alleges that the defendant posted sexually explicit videos of the alleged victim in the instant case after she left as means of harassment. The state fails to assert to the court that the same videos were posted prior to the alleged victim leaving and were active internet videos months before the alleged victim left the house.
Now, I will have to strongly disagree with that statement stating that the videos were posted while the victim was still there and had been in circulation on the internet before she left, that statement I'm going to strongly disagree with, because, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, y'all, but it's my recollection that those Twitter videos surfaced once the alleged victim left the cult.
The evidence provided by the state in fact shows that the purported videos were on the internet prior to the date in the indictment. In Makru First State 349 GA, the Georgia Court of Appeals overturned lower court's ruling in allowing the testimony of wife against her husband for alleged separate sexual acts against their 2 children. The court held that the acts were not the similar, involved different children, and that the testimony was extremely prejudicial. In the instant matter, there is unquestionable extreme prejudice in the offered testimony of the 3 evidentiary witnesses. The defendant's alleged actions in the current indictment are not what at least 2 of the 3 purported evidentiary witnesses testified to. The evidentiary witnesses did not describe evidence of false imprisonment and rape.
I will say witness number 3 did indeed discuss elements of false imprisonment by way of the defendant holding her documents away from her, making it impossible for her to leave and come back to the United States. That's false imprisonment, sir.
The probative value is minor compared to the prejudicial effect. The court has to balance the probative versus prejudicial value, but most also consider the probability of confusion of the issues. In the instant case, the defendant is alleged to have had sex with the accuser alone in room, and furthermore acted in concert with others to keep the alleged victim from leaving the home here in Georgia. The 3 evidentiary witnesses complained of being misled by the defendant's cult and polygamous lifestyle, but have not provided information in any way similar to that of the accuser in the instant case. Furthermore, each of the 3 evidentiary witnesses have given numerous video interviews over the years. Many of the interviews provide direct impeachment material that the defendant will be required to present to the jury in order to defend himself, not against the case at hand, but just against these 3 extraneous allegations that are simply unrelated and likely to confuse the jury. In State v. Dowdell 335 GA, the Georgia Court of Appeals held that lower court was correct in ruling that the state's need in admitting the evidence was outweighed by the lack of similarity between the 3 other accusations and the one at issue. The lower court also further considered and ruled correctly that the introduction of the additional accusations would certainly confuse the jury and complicate the trial. In the instant matter, the allegation is not a complex one. The accuser alleges the defendant raped her and falsely imprisoned her. That in itself is not a complex allegation and will lead to fairly straightforward trial. In the event that the court allows in these other acts requested by the state, the straightforward and streamlined case will no longer exist, as the defendant will need to thoroughly defend himself with all available evidence against each of these accusers and the accuser in the indicted case. Furthermore, the Georgia Court of Appeals held that it was proper for the court to focus on 24-4-413 material and whether it was more probative than prejudicial, before considering the offered evidence for other relevant purposes, or not. The state alleges that the defendant committed acts of aggravated sodomy in their prior acts allegations. Only one of the 3 evidentiary witnesses testified to an act of sodomy. The accuser in the instant case does not allege sodomy, but instead gives an interview where she describes lovemaking with the defendant. The jury will have to decide if a believed sexual act occurred and whether it was against the accuser's will. The state's accusation of prior act of aggravated sodomy by intimidation does in no way comport with the case brought by the state in the matter at hand. The description of this alleged other act does not in any way provide probative knowledge to the jury. In State v. Chalgeen 2023 GA, the Georgia Supreme Court ruled the major function of Rule 403 is to exclude matters of scant or cumulative probative force, dragged in by the heels for the sake of its prejudicial effects due to the danger that the jury may convict the defendant not for the offense charged but for the extrinsic offense. The jury would certainly be exposed to tremendous amount of extrinsic material, That would certainly tend to convince the jury that the defendant is cult leader and rapes all the women within the cult and furthermore treats them with acts of violence to control them. The evidentiary witnesses did not all testify to acts of physical violence or rape. The state alleges that the evidentiary witnesses were forced to have oral or anal sex due to zero fear of being harmed. The accuser in the instant case does not make such an allegation. The accuser does not report having sex due to the defendant's violent nature or because he purportedly threatened her to do so. The state contends that without such context, it would be impossible for the jury to truly understand the victim's experience or to analyze the issue of consent in this case. The state simply fails to provide the court with actual evidence from the instant matter that the purported victim does not make such an accusation of similarity as that of the three evidentiary witnesses. Conclusion. The defendant requests that this honorable court exclude the testimony of all three witnesses introduced at the hearing. The defendant respectfully asks the court to closely analyze and review the testimony of each of the three witnesses and compare them to the actual allegations in the case at issue. The defendant is in possession of what he believes to be impeachment material for each of the alleged other act witnesses. The defendant's necessity in defending himself will further lead to confusion of the issues and far more prejudicial information being presented and refuted than if the current case remained solely based upon the issues at hand. The defendant respectfully requests this honorable court to deny the state's request to submit the evidence of other acts. Respectfully submitted this day of February 2024. Robert L. Booker G. Abar.